The story of the United States begins with brave people crossing the ocean. They came from Europe, looking for a new life. Many sailed from England to a land called Virginia. Others went to Plymouth, Massachusetts seeking religious freedom. Life was hard in the New World. Colonists had to build homes and grow food. They learned to live in a wild land. These early settlers were the foundation of a new nation. These first communities grew quickly. More people arrived from Europe, bringing their own traditions. They started farms and businesses. Towns and cities began to appear along the coast. The colonists relied on each other to survive. They worked together to build a new society in this unfamiliar land. As they prospered, they also faced conflict with the native people. The colonists and Native Americans had different ways of life. They competed for land and resources. This led to misunderstandings and, sadly, wars. Despite the hardships, the colonies grew stronger. People pushed further inland, exploring the vast continent. They were building a new world full of promise and challenges. The colonists began to see themselves less as British subjects and more as Americans. This new identity would have a profound impact on the future of the colonies. It set the stage for a revolution that would change the course of history. The colonists' desire for freedom and self-determination would soon lead them to challenge the most powerful empire on earth. As the colonies prospered, tensions grew with England. England controlled the colonies' trade and taxed them heavily. The colonists felt this was unfair. They believed they deserved a say in their own government. Leaders like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson emerged. They spoke out against British rule. They argued for the rights and freedoms of the colonists. The colonists' frustration reached a boiling point with events like the Boston Tea Party. This act of defiance showed their willingness to fight for their rights. In 1775, the tension that had been building for years between the American colonies and the British Crown finally erupted into open conflict. The battles of Lexington and Concord marked the beginning of the Revolutionary War, a struggle that would change the course of history. The colonists, driven by a desire for self-governance and freedom from British rule, formed an army. This newly established Continental Army was led by George Washington, a man whose leadership and vision would become legendary. Washington's ability to inspire and unite the troops was crucial in the fight against the British. The American Revolution was not just a war, it was a fight for freedom and independence. The Declaration of Independence, adopted on July 4, 1776, articulated the colonists' aspirations and their belief in the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This document became a symbol of their resolve and a rallying cry for the revolution. The colonists faced a powerful enemy in the British Empire, which boasted one of the most formidable military forces in the world. The British soldiers were well-trained, well-equipped, and experienced in warfare, making the colonists' quest for independence seem almost impossible. But the American colonists were determined to fight for their right to govern themselves. They formed militias, rallied their communities, and stood firm in their belief that they could create a new nation based on democratic principles and individual freedoms. The war lasted for 8 long years, from 1775 to 1783. It was a period marked by intense battles, strategic maneuvers, and significant sacrifices. Key battles such as Bunker Hill, Saratoga, and Yorktown defined the course of the war and tested the resolve of the American forces. Throughout these years, the colonists showed great courage and resilience. Figures like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams played pivotal roles in securing international support and crafting the new nation's foundational documents. The soldiers endured harsh conditions, from brutal winters to scarce supplies, yet their unity and determination never wavered. They faced many setbacks, including defeats and hardships, but they never gave up hope. The spirit of perseverance and the belief in their cause kept them going, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Finally, in 1783, after years of relentless struggle, the British surrendered at Yorktown. This decisive victory was a turning point that signaled the end of the war and the beginning of a new era for the American colonies. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, officially recognized the independence of the United States of America. This momentous event marked the birth of a new nation, founded on the principles of liberty, equality, and democracy. The celebrations that followed were a testament to the colonists' triumph and the realization of their long-held dream of independence. After the Revolution, the newly formed nation faced many challenges. The 13 colonies had to unite under one government. They created the Constitution, a document that outlined the laws of the land. It established a system of government based on the will of the people. Despite the challenges, the young nation grew rapidly. The early 19th century was a time of immense growth and transformation for the United States. Towns sprang up almost overnight, and settlers worked tirelessly to build homes and establish bustling markets. The promise of new opportunities and a better life drove many to take on the hardships of frontier life. People moved westward, expanding the frontiers of the United States. The Oregon Trail became a symbol of this relentless push towards the unknown. Families packed their lives into covered wagons, braving treacherous conditions and uncertain futures. The maps of the time reflected this ever-changing landscape, with new territories being charted and claimed. New states joined the Union, each with its own unique character. Statehood ceremonies marked these significant milestones as communities celebrated their official entry into the Union. Early state flags and historical maps tell the story of a nation in constant flux, growing and evolving with each new edition. The spirit of exploration and expansion was deeply ingrained in the American identity. The Lewis and Clark expedition opened up vast new territories while the gold rush drew thousands in search of fortune. Pioneers explored uncharted lands, driven by a sense of adventure and the promise of prosperity. However, the westward expansion came at a cost. The relentless push for new land led to widespread deforestation and significant environmental impacts. Abandoned Native American villages stood as silent witnesses to the price of progress. Native American tribes were displaced from their ancestral lands. The forced migrations, such as the Trail of Tears, were harrowing journeys that resulted in immense suffering and loss. Entire communities were uprooted, their way of life forever altered. The issue of slavery also continued to cast a shadow over the nation. In the South, slave plantations thrived, while abolitionist rallies in the North called for an end to this inhumane practice. Historical photos of slavery reveal the stark realities and deep divisions that plagued the country. The stage was set for a conflict that would test the very fabric of American democracy. The Civil War loomed on the horizon, a battle between the Union and the Confederacy that would determine the future of the nation. Abraham Lincoln's addresses to the nation underscored the gravity of the situation, as the country stood on the brink of a defining moment in its history. The issue of slavery deeply divided the nation. In the North, many people opposed slavery on moral grounds. They saw it as a cruel and unjust system. In the South, slavery was an integral part of the economy, especially on cotton plantations. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president. His election marked a pivotal moment in American history, setting the stage for a series of events that would forever change the nation. Lincoln, a man of humble beginnings, rose to prominence with his strong stance against the expansion of slavery, a contentious issue that had long divided the country. Lincoln opposed the expansion of slavery. He believed that slavery was morally wrong and that its spread to new territories would only deepen the nation's divisions. His speeches and debates on the subject garnered both fervent support and vehement opposition, highlighting the growing rift between the North and the South. His election sparked outrage in the South. Many Southern states viewed Lincoln's presidency as a direct threat to their way of life and economic interests, which were heavily reliant on slave labor. The fear of losing their autonomy and the institution of slavery led to widespread protests and calls for secession. Several Southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. This bold move was a declaration of their intent to preserve their way of life, even if it meant breaking away from the United States. The secession was formalized through a series of conventions and declarations, setting the stage for a monumental conflict. This act of rebellion ignited the Civil War. The first shots were fired at Fort Sumter in April 1861, marking the beginning of a brutal and bloody conflict that would last for 4 long years. The war pitted brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, in a struggle that would determine the future of the nation. The Civil War was a brutal and bloody conflict. Battles were fought across the country, from the rolling hills of Virginia to the plains of Tennessee. The war saw unprecedented levels of carnage and destruction, with hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians losing their lives. The horrors of war were captured in photographs and letters, providing a stark reminder of the conflict's human cost. Families were torn apart as brother fought brother. The war created deep personal and emotional scars as families found themselves on opposite sides of the conflict. Stories of divided loyalties and personal sacrifices became emblematic of the broader national struggle, illustrating the profound impact of the war on individual lives. The nation was locked in a battle for its very survival. The Union and the Confederacy clashed in numerous battles, each side determined to prevail. The stakes were incredibly high, with the future of the United States hanging in the balance. The war tested the resolve and resilience of the American people, pushing them to their limits. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 declared the freedom of slaves in Confederate territories. This landmark decision transformed the nature of the war, making it not only a fight to preserve the Union but also a battle for human rights and dignity. The proclamation galvanized abolitionists and provided a moral imperative for the Union's cause. This turned the war into a fight for human rights as well as national unity. The Union Army, now fighting for the liberation of enslaved people, gained a renewed sense of purpose. The war became a symbol of the struggle for freedom and equality, inspiring future generations to continue the fight for civil rights. After 4 years of devastating warfare, the Confederacy surrendered in 1865. The surrender at Appomattox Courthouse marked the end of the Civil War, bringing relief to a war-weary nation. The Union's victory ensured that the United States would remain united and set the stage for the country's reconstruction and healing. The Union was preserved, and slavery was abolished. The end of the war marked the beginning of a new era in American history. The abolition of slavery was a monumental achievement, but the nation faced the daunting task of rebuilding and addressing the deep-seated issues that had led to the conflict. The legacy of the Civil War continues to shape the United States, reminding us of the enduring struggle for justice and equality. Section 5: A Nation Divided. The Civil War left the South in ruins. Reconstruction began, aiming to rebuild the South and integrate former slaves into society. This was a time of great hope and immense challenges. The nation grappled with the legacy of slavery and the meaning of freedom for millions of newly emancipated African Americans. The period of Reconstruction saw progress and setbacks. African Americans gained citizenship and the right to vote. However, they faced discrimination, violence, and segregation. The struggle for civil rights would continue for generations to come. The late 19th century witnessed tremendous industrial growth in America. The Industrial Revolution transformed the nation into an economic powerhouse. Factories and railroads sprang up across the land. Cities grew rapidly, attracting millions of immigrants seeking a better life. The Industrial Revolution brought both prosperity and hardship. While it created vast wealth, it also led to problems like pollution, poverty, and labor unrest. The United States was becoming a global player. The country expanded its influence overseas, particularly in the Pacific and Latin America. The Spanish-American War marked the nation's emergence as a world power. The 20th century would bring new challenges and opportunities as the United States continued its journey toward becoming a global superpower.